This is my passion point, and this is one of my specialities, is the highly sensitive temperament trait. This is a genetic temperament trait. Researchers have traced it to over 100 species, including our own, the Homo sapien, definitely with dogs, cats, birds, reptiles, fish. Highly sensitive animals of any species have a trait that is evolutionarily advantageous under certain types of environmental conditions. And what that means in plain English is that if 80% of the population, of the species population, behaves one way when, let's say, a natural disaster occurs, and 20% behaves a different way, then there's a greater chance that that animal population will survive the disaster. So let's say there's a forest fire and 80% of the gophers run underground. And that turns out to be the wrong behavior because the fire overtakes them and they all perish. Well, the 20% that's highly sensitive might choose to run in a different direction. And because they didn't follow the 80%, they survive and the species continues. So that's a very extreme example of how the highly sensitive personality trait can work, how it developed most likely, and why it's a good thing that we have it. Highly sensitive, just the term highly sensitive, this doesn't mean quick to take offense. It doesn't mean they've got a thin skin. It means they are highly attuned to their environment. They're highly aware. Sensitivity in this case indicates sensory awareness and alertness, finely tuned ability to pick up subtle changes in the environment, subtle nuances, shifts in the personalities surrounding them and the environment surrounding them. This can mean that the world, not their relationships, even their own bodies can feel overwhelming at times, and just too much, too loud, too close, too bright, too everything all at once. And they tend to need more downtime. They tend to need more alone time. They tend to seek out natural environments. Like if you see a dog or a cat just laying down on the lawn for a while and just kind of grounding with the earth and attuning their body to the magnetic frequency of the earth. This is a way of off-gassing, of detoxifying from some of the impact of what's going on around them in their daily life. And so a highly sensitive pet can have this trait. It's a genetic trait. It's a heritable genetic trait. They don't develop it. It can be influenced by environment. So there's the argument for nature, which is the genetics, and then nurture, which is the environment. A highly sensitive animal that's repeatedly subjected to highly intense or negative experiences may become even more sensitized, even more reluctant to engage with life in the world, even more withdrawn or self-protective as a result of that. However, the highly sensitive trait can also provide an animal with a more extreme adaptability to come out of trauma, to come out of difficult environments and actually turn around and thrive. So there's a lot to love about this trait. But if you don't know that your animal is highly sensitive, you don't know that they have the personality trait, especially if you've had many different animals, all the same breed or the same species, and they haven't had the highly sensitive trait, when you encounter a highly sensitive pet for the first time, you could certainly be forgiven for thinking that they're just really, really anxious all the time. Light stimulates them more. Sound stimulates them more, and it may not be anything that they can do anything about. Like a non-highly sensitive pet may in time become acclimated to cars backfiring or fireworks popping or the sound of the booming bass of the stereo or bright party lights or crowds of their own kind or of our kind or a mix. The highly sensitive pet probably is never really going to acclimate to those things. They're rather going to develop a set of coping strategies designed to keep them at a safe distance If that means they become aggressive towards strangers, or they run under the bed and won't come out when there's a fireworks display or there's a thunderstorm, or they don't want to leave the house when it's very cold or very hot, that's them trying to cope and adapt so that their highly sensitive nature doesn't get overstimulated again and again and again. Because if this continues to happen and they cannot get away and there's nothing that they try that works, then what we've got is an overabundance of cortisol in the system. The cortisol is the stress hormone. It's called the silent killer for a reason. And so then we've got an animal that's increasingly just bathing in their own toxic cortisol, and all kinds of health problems can result in things like that. So a highly sensitive pet, and I've got a lot more resources about highly sensitive pet on my website. I've written about it in my blog, a podcast episode about it. I've got a help guide that you can access. It's got a whole bunch of resources. It's something that's not really all that well known among pet parents and animal guardians. And it's really still emerging science in the human species as well. And so there's so much more to learn. In fact, if you're resonating with some of what I've described, you might be highly sensitive yourself. I am. This little girl is. And I've parented several highly sensitive animals over the decades, and they do act differently. And it can be all too easy to label what you're seeing as anxiety. And it could also be that that's true. Highly sensitive beings of any species are more prone to experience any kind of emotional reaction or state more intensely, and anxiety is no exception. So if a highly sensitive animal is anxious, they are probably going to appear more anxious than a non-highly sensitive animal would appear if they were experiencing the same degree of anxiety.